General Wayne Downing Airport in Peoria, is what did it used to be called? Just the Peoria International. And anyway, when Wayne Downing passed away as a complication of surgery, he was not that old. And she gave him to the Peoria Historical Society, and we have him here at Flanagan. And this would be his last uniform, the one he's wearing in the picture. And when he was young and slim and trim at West Point, he would have worn this one to class, the dress gray. I imagine he wore that to class. And this would have been his full dress uniform. And this weighs, I swear, 30 pounds. It's on the form, we can't lift it, but when I had it just on a hanger, I would always ask a guy to lift it, and he'd go, how did they wear these? But you know, just like the Navy pea coats, the old Navy pea coats, you know, the wind blowing at West Point, I imagine could get pretty wicked in the winter. So this, you know, they've worn these since, I'd have to look up the year, but I'm sure for 100 years. So this is his Spalding. He was a student at Spalding, back when there was a Spalding, and this was his bathrobe, which he took with him to West Point. So we've got an S for Spalding. He was in football, and you know, it's had a little bit of wear here, or maybe a mouse got to it, but it's a pretty neat artifact, I think, to have in addition to the uniforms. Yeah, this gal is a World War II Women's Army Corps, and the Women's Army Corps, when it started out, I knew a gal in Chillicothe, where I'm from, who I have a ton of pictures from, but it's Chillicothe, and I made a big composite thing. She made movies, recruitment movies that they'd show in theaters. She was a model, and so anyway, and she had a uniform just like this. But all women from the beginning were officers. A woman is always an officer. She's never a private or whatever. Yeah, and she would be I'd have to look up what this is, but she's a sergeant of some sort. Yeah. And she would have had a flat cap and this would be like a winter uniform. Now the gal I knew had pinks. She had the khaki, which was warm weather because she served pretty much in Southern California. And that's how she got into showbiz, I guess. So maybe about a year ago, because of the Illinois Bicentennial, we decided to we had a lot of flags in here, in fact, and our volunteer Tom has kind of been looking up flags at the office. So this flag, well, this is Illinois, the 21 stars. Illinois was the 21st state admitted to the Union, just like the sign says. The flag only lasted 1 year, as Alabama and Maine were admitted the following year. Now, this is a rarity. This is a handmade Civil War flag made out of wool, and the moths have gotten to it, but just the fact that it exists, and on both sides, the stars are appliqued, and there was no particular pattern. Flags weren't really manufactured. People just made them. So they would look like this, and it's really difficult to count those stars because every time you count them, because of the pattern, you get a different count. Yeah, yeah. Now over here is our World War I, and some of the uniforms were heavier than others. Like that would have been a winter weight one, and this would have been a lighter weight one. And I imagine a lot of people have seen the movie War Horse, which is a real war as hell in World War I movie for sure. The helmets were metal and they were not light, and they probably did the job, but you know, it was uncomfortable. And in any war, whether it was the Civil War or World War I, World War II, and today things are more techie, of course, but you usually got a wool uniform, and as you lost weight, even though these young guys probably were slim and trim like we all are at 18. Your uniform shrunk. It got wet in the snow, wet in the rain. But the good thing about wool is you're warm in wool. No matter what happens, Now this guy's boots. He's a little bow-legged looking there, but he's doing the best he can riding horses, and he didn't have a Jeep. But these are two pull on your boots. There are two tabs on the inside to pull on these boots, because if anyone's ever put on a pair of cowboy boots, they know that's difficult enough, and this is worse. So to get your boots off, you would have this boot jack. And I've never tried one, but I'm sure it works pretty well. Let's see what else we have here. Well, if you got the opportunity to shave, you would have your metal mirror, and I think they probably still use these, or at least used them up through Vietnam. You would have your soap dish. Everything's in olive drab. You would have your strop, because you're gonna be sharpening your straight razor, I guess, by World War I. You might even need some prophylactics, if you're fraternizing with the European women of the evening. And this would be a bugle if someone was a bugler, the flat cap. And this is a pair of summer weight Jodhpurs. Let's see. Here's the interior. And these are the dog tags, by the way. This is what the dog tags look like in World War I. So they had a little padding in the cap, and it looks like it adjusted for size to some extent. Now, this. You know why this looks so good? Because it's never been fired. This was mismanufactured, and these can never be fired. And someone donated this to the society, and I don't know the history on it, except that it's never been bench fired, I don't think, or it would have blown up. That was the problem with it. But it's really quite nice looking, Yeah, different. This is a Navy cutlass, 1850, an 1850 foot soldier sword. A cutlass is curved. This is the scabbard for that. This is, I suppose a musician needed a sword too. He had to have some way to defend himself. It might have just been ornamental, but it doesn't look especially ornamental. These are my favorites. We don't have this guy identified, I don't think. I actually brought over this. This isn't in the collection. This is something that was in my husband's family. We have no clue who it is, none, or when it was taken or anything. But it appears to me he has a, that's the uniform you get when you go in. And these old photos taken with something like that, they always retouched them heavily. Like if you didn't even own a good suit, they would paint one in. And here we have a typical, the office, this is an officer's coat. So an officer wouldn't have been wearing this, but this is a Union forage cap with a Corps badge, and I'm not sure what the Corps is, but everything, you can look everything up these days. Everyone in Peoria has heard the name of Captain Henry Detweiler, who ran a steamer. So when the Civil War came along, he would go down south to probably Tennessee area, and pick up people from those battles and bring them back, the sick and the dead. So this has been painted up by somebody, and it is a drummer boy, captured Confederate drummer boy drum that the young soldier was grateful to Captain Detweiler, so he presented him with this drum. So the 86th Illinois Infantry was organized in Peoria and mustered into federal service on August 27, 1862. And this was entirely composed of Central Illinois men, one of two. That was entirely Illinois men. I think the other one was in the Chicago area. But they would, when they came home, they would have these anniversaries, as long as there were plenty of Civil War veterans. Most of them, I imagine, would meet at the GAR Hall. That was the VFW, AMVETS, and such, you know, back in the day. In fact, that was the first such organization. I imagine the South had one too. I don't know what it would have been called. Well, they have the Sons of the Union Army that still meets down at the GAR. Yeah. Something interesting, which I never think about, is that the 50-star flag is from 1960 to today, our longest serving flag. Well, the theme here, there's a lot of themes. We have an entire book on this guy, Russell Diefenbaugh. Russell Diefenbaugh died at Pearl Harbor. And a couple years ago at Christmas, we did a World War II theme. I think I've done it here twice. Anyway, we think his fiancée that he had before he went into the war brought these pictures, and I think there's some artifacts too, to the office and gave them, you know, and this has got to be from who knows what here. This almost has to be from the 1700s, early 1800s, maybe the Revolutionary War. Maybe there was a Rev War, somebody back in his family. So they were engaged, and I can't remember what's downtown, but we kind of figured out the story of him. But so sad, you know, a lot of people were killed at Pearl Harbor that day. I know people who were, well, they passed on too, who were at Pearl Harbor, but they weren't bombed, you know. This fine fellow whose eyes follow you everywhere in the room, Mr. John Ziegler. Mr. John Ziegler was a mover and shaker in Peoria. And you had to have money if you had these nice portraits painted. And there's two others at the office at a different time when they're older. The couple is older, but they're very nice, painted by a well-known woman painter, Emily White of Chicago. So Captain Ziegler, I guess he didn't buy his way out of the Civil War. He must have signed up. So he, in battle, well, here's something I should show you. Captain Ziegler had a Tiffany & Company sword because he could. Now this might have just been not the one he carried in the war, but a commemorative one or a decorative one of some sort. But I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, do you have a Tiffany & Company sword? Or do we have anything Tiffany & Company? I certainly don't. I certainly don't. Now here is Captain Ziegler took this Confederate cavalry officer's sword in battle. So this is a very valuable and interesting artifact, I think. I might as well show you this to throw a little Vietnam in here. This is my late husband's Aussie hat. And I'll have to show you. This was his Navy. He served on the Coral Sea early in the Vietnam War. He designed this patch, and I have a couple others that haven't been washed so often. Here's his initials, David Lee Heron. And he used this jacket, you know, he just washed it and didn't take care of it, but it's you know, it's a neat family thing for the kids. And the ship apparently needed some fixing, so they went over to Australia and spent a month over there. And I think they spent another month in Hawaii. It was really rough. And actually, it was rough because his yearbook from the ship for the year he was on it, he pointed out pilots who didn't come back, that left the aircraft carrier and never came back. And we were in Pensacola one time where the Coral Sea, which was a World War II ship, and it was getting old by Vietnam. I suppose it served in Korea maybe too. But it was turned into probably automobiles later on. You know, they would junk them like they do any metal. And this, of course, is mostly in World War II. They got into this. You would put this in your window for how many, you know, sons you had who were in the war. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. And here we have a genuine World War I hero. Those who tried to shoot him. We got this from some hall or KC club or something that had a piece of the main, the mast of the main. And, you know, it's kind of like those Civil War war logs, you know. I think it was probably that sort of an idea. Yeah, and, you know, when you ran out of ammo, you had to have something. I don't think we need my Kleenex in the picture. So here you go. Here you go.
Get you with the.
Here you go. There, you got that.
You're ready to.
And this is a parachute, silk parachutes.
World War II.
Yeah. Here, silk parachutes were recycled into wedding dresses for sure. And, you know, I mean, this is nice silk and light. There's nothing lighter. Nylon and polyester are a lot heavier than silk was.
An actual parachute.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know, it's in such good condition, I doubt it was ever used. You know, it might have been. I mean, it's hard to say as long as it didn't tear.
Yeah.
But it's big. I've never even unwrapped it. Look at this. Look at this. This is fantastic.
Kind of hard to imagine. Beautiful.
Guy I knew very well from Chillicothe had didn't have the Congressional Medal of Honor, but he was a navigator on a B-17, and he in his 70s went to Bradley to learn how to write his own book and self-publish it. And Lloyd Courtney, if anyone recognizes the name, he had an implement dealership. And I said to Lloyd, he flew 29 missions from England into Germany, and he said one time he saw about 24 German Bs headed towards their, see, the fighters are always faster in the air than the bombers, back in the day anyway. And he said, right then we got over the border anti-aircraft, and he said we turned around. And he was there at D-Day and saw the duck boats landing. And he said, you know, we didn't know, and we had orders to turn around, but he said we could see them through the heavy undercover. And it was foggy, and he said we couldn't have seen the German bunkers or whatever they were in order to bomb. And then when he got back, he heard how badly it went. He said that always haunted him. And I don't know if every serviceman got one of those, but I'm sure they passed them around. I have about 100 of them. Sometimes I bring in my own stuff for props because I don't think we have enough color in here. Or just
Those
to
are
make,
great.
just to switch things out and, you know.
Those are absolutely great.
Aren't they, and they all have different things, yeah.
We hope you enjoyed your tour of our military room here at Flanagan House. We would love to have you come see the rest of the house. The Flanagan home is open on the first Sunday of every month, and we are located at 942 Glen Oak Avenue.